Hi, I'm Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Crates. Go out and sketch a green sea turtle instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to sketch a green sea turtle by applying what you learned in your step-by-step lesson. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you go out to sketch. You can head out to an aquarium or sketch from an HD video at home. Today, I'm sketching from a composite video for demonstrative purposes. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, enjoy your time observing nature, and don't get too caught up with the details. Help out this tiny business by clicking the like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Let's get started. So make sure you use what you know about the animal from your step-by-step lesson, and you can even use your final reference image to figure out where things can be placed and how big it might be on the page in order to fit. And first you want to think about where you want it to be placed. Do you want it the same as your final reference image? Or do you want it to be a little bit different? And do you want the flippers to be up or down or in the middle? So you have to make those decisions before you even start drawing. Once you make those choices, you can go ahead and use a pencil, draw really light, rough sketches. And I think the best thing to do would be just to kind of draw a line for where that shell's going to go. And then just start drawing a circle, kind of an oval shape, I guess, around that space to define the shell. So it's basically going to take up that much space. And then you can put the back flippers in. That's pretty easy. Just a real rough sketch shape with a very light mark. And then you can put the front flippers in. Do you want them up or down? And I might just do them down. I started on the up, and so I'm going to go ahead and just erase that. I changed my mind. I'm just going to do down flippers. Can't really see the back one very much when it's down. And so there's kind of a shape here. And you just have to wait for the animal to be in the position where you work on a different part while you're waiting for that position to be in view. And again, this is super rough to start, so I'm going to be changing a lot of things. Just kind of getting the sizing on and placement and getting a starting point. So it looks a little crazy right now. And sometimes that's all you're going to get of an animal. If you have enough time, then you can keep going and working towards doing more. So I'm going to start with I think the flipper, because that kind of threw everything off a little bit here. And so I'm going to bring a little bit of darker marks in. Just wait until the turtle is in the right position for me to see those spaces. So when the flipper is down. And I'm not going to add any of the scales on the flippers yet. I'm just going to draw in the basic shape. And whatever kind of shape my eye caught. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be rough. It's going to be messy. It's just a sketch. And start drawing in the turtle's neck. It might take a little while for you to get those pieces in because you might have to wait for the animal. That is why a composite video make this a little faster, so you don't have to wait for the animal to get into the right position. And so I have the basic shape of the head, and I'm not going to add a bunch of details yet. I'm going to go ahead and move on to getting the shape of the shell in. And that's a little easier because it kind of stays about the same. The turtle's in a similar position the entire time as far as the the shell position in this composite video I have. And some of these shapes might change a little bit. This might get a little bit more domed. Maybe it was too flat. It might be a little bit higher as well. So something in between that, and that's okay. And then I'm going to get these back flippers in a little bit nicer. And there's also, you can just make sure that I have the line right. So from here to here, actually a little bit more like that. And you can see the belly a little bit. And then when the flippers are both down, you just see a little, at the back flipper poking out just a little. So I'm not going to erase a lot of these lines. I'm just going to leave them so that I can go fast and just keep going. Because if you were sketching this animal at an aquarium, it might not be sitting still for you. Maybe it would, but it might leave at any moment. And so being able to practice and sketch quickly makes a big difference. So I can easily fit in a lot of these details now with the turtle left. I could use my final reference image to kind of determine where a lot of the shell scoots would go and where the eye would go, and some of the other details as well. But we're gonna just assume the turtle was still there for a while, and we're gonna start adding in some details. I'm gonna start with the face, and there's really no particular reason for that. We have one scale here in the front between the eyes. Or there's two, but you can only see one from this view. And then there is the beak, kind of goes around, down. It's hard to differentiate a lot of the beak and the other parts, like the chin. Kind of goes up, and then over here, there's a few little scales. And I'm just basing the eye shape and position to determine where each one of these scales belong and the size. So I'm referring to this and looking at the turtle and then adding them in. And they're not going to be perfect, it's just a sketch. I'm getting them in real quick. And it's going to be a little different because it is a sketch. I'm not trying to get it just right. And I can adjust these a little bit too if I need to. But when you're adding these scales in, it's helpful to kind of think of them in relation to each other and where they fit when you're looking at the lines and where they land. So this line is here, this line is here, this line is against this one, this is under this, and you just kind of build off. So I've started with building off from the eye and kind of working out. And I'm just doing it really quick, so it's not going to be the correct sizing or the correct spacing. It's just going to be similar. It's just a sketch, just a representation of this animal. There's some lines that might confuse me. They're a little too dark that I drew in. I can go ahead and erase those. As long as they don't confuse me though, I leave them in just for speed and getting this image put on quickly. And again, these creases in the skin, I'm not going to get as exact as I was with the scales on the face. Even though I wasn't super particular about that, it's a little bit more important than the creases in the skin. And then we have the scales on the flipper, and basically they kind of go all the way around the outside. And since this is a sketch, I'm not going to get exact about the number. I'm just going to kind of put them in. And at the bottom, there's a couple that are a little bit longer, and then a short one and a little bit longer one too. And you can kind of see that in our final reference image as well if you want to refer to that. So some of them are a little bit bigger. And then there's another couple rows kind of going up. And so I'm going to draw a line to represent that. And there's one scale here, and then there's some scales kind of going up this flipper. And they're not in any really particular order. Kind of seem to be all over the place based on observing the video. They fit into each other, but I'm just not going to take a lot of time to make it really exact or specific. You can take more time if you want, or if you have the time to do that. For this demonstration, I'm going to just kind of do a quick representation. And I'm not going to get exact. I'm just going to kind of get the 3 rows. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one on the outside. So I'm just going to add those 4 rows, 4 columns, depending on which way you're looking at it. And I'm not going to pay attention to the sizing or placement too much. It's just a sketch of a moving animal. And it's okay. It doesn't need to be exact. One thing that is a little bit more exact are the number of scutes on the shell. So it's going to be a lot like our final reference image. So go ahead and start in the middle and then work your way out. So go ahead and do the middle one. Make sure you leave some space for those scutes on the bottom. And so if you need to add in some of those outer scutes, a line for those first, you can do that. And just kind of leave a line here to help figure out where those go. And actually that's, I left one of these lines and it got a little confusing, so I'm gonna have to erase that and redraw some of this shell line. So I have the shell coming here and I got confused with the belly part, and that made it harder. So that's when a good time when you want to go ahead and erase a line if it makes it confusing. So I have this belly line, and I started to think that was part of the upper shell. So I want to make sure to add some space for that upper shell. So I'll go ahead and draw that part in. Just a really light line because I'm going to define it into different sections in a second. And then we have a line. Just kind of think about this as little individual shapes on the turtle shell. So starting in the center, and there's a line down. And then there's like a little crease here going into these scutes down along the outer edge. And then this goes back up. And then there's a line going up. So we have some individual shapes here. And then there is a shape. I already kind of drew this part in. And this line kind of just goes up like that. And then in the back, it's kind of the same thing. There's a scoot kind of coming up here. And then falling on the back. and it kind of has part of this crease here and then back up. And there's a line here and another line here. So then we're going to go ahead and add the lines going down, and they're not straight, they are curved. So you want kind of curved and then down. And it's kind of the same thing with this one. This one curves the other direction and then down. So that'll give a little bit more of a shape to your turtle. And if you need to adjust any of these sizes, you can. So maybe this was a little too big, you can just kind of some darker marks to adjust that. Or you can adjust the curves of the shell if you have time, or if that's something that you feel like is important for you to change. And then I'm just going to start working out from here and add some of these lines for the outer scutes. And I'm not going to get really exact, just kind of thinking, okay, this one, there's 2 lines in between this one and then this scoot right here. There's a line kind of coming here, and then another one kind of like right there, and another one here. So we got the scoots there, and then I refer to this part of the shell and I say, okay, there's a line about this far down, and then there's a line about this far in, and this kind of curves up. And then there's a line about this far down, and we already got this one. So really approximate, not really worrying too much. And just in case the turtle's swimming away and we need to paint this and we don't have the turtle here, I'm just going to go ahead and draw in the circles for where the sunburst and some of those direction lines. Just as a reference to help me out, just in case. So if you're painting this turtle when you're in the field, or imagine it'd be pretty difficult to do if you were scuba diving or snorkeling, but if you were doing it like in an aquarium, and you might want to, I think that this is a little too much, so I'm going to make it a little bit more narrow, cut it down like that, and we'll leave those outside lines and just keep with this line here. And you can make some adjustments by just adding some darker lines. Maybe make this a little bit smaller, the top part. The shell's a little smaller. Again, it's a sketch, so don't spend too much. It's just an observation of the animal. Don't spend too much time going over and changing everything. Maybe make it a little bit bigger here. And it goes right into the flipper. Some of the sizing might be a little bit off, but again, it's just a sketch. But actually, I might just leave that, because when the flipper is down, it's pretty dark and you can't see what's under there. Add in a few of the back flipper scales. And I'm just going to add some of these bigger ones and then add little ones in to kind of fill it in. Maybe do like this outer row here. And then there are some that just kind of go back. And since it's a sketch, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting it just right. And you can't really see much going on the back flipper, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to write in the common name and the scientific name. Next, I'll go ahead and add some paint. I have the paints I used for my step-by-step lesson, and I just added some water to revive them. In addition to that, I also have my paints just in case. I have them with me just in case I need more. Sometimes fresh paint is a bit more vibrant as well, so maybe that's something I'll need. So first, just like in our step-by-step, I'm going to add this lighter yellow-green. And I'm just gonna add it to the entire turtle. And I'm not gonna pay too much attention to keeping it within the lines. I'm just gonna add it in and do my best just getting it quickly on there, dabbing it off into my towel before applying it to my page to keep from having too much water on that page and causing it to buckle, and to give you more control of that paint as well. And then you clean after your brush. You want to let it dry, and then you can add some more paints, but it should dry pretty quickly, so it's already drying on the back flippers. So I can go ahead and start there with a little bit more paint. And that's another benefit to sketching with less water going directly onto your paper by dabbing it onto your towel, because it'll dry faster and you can keep painting while you're watching the animal or the plant. So I'll take some of this turtle mahogany and check it, and looks like it could be a little wetter, but I think I'm going to stick with it. And I'm just going to add it in to all these spots, and I'm just going to quickly add it. I'm not worrying too much about keeping it exact. And check this to see if it's dry before adding it there, and pick up a little bit more, dab it off on my towel. Quickly adding it in to all these spots where the scales. So I'm just kind of dabbing in the center and kind of moving the paint toward the outside, kind of like with a marker, just kind of filling it in. Then I'll pick up a little bit more, and I'm going to add it to these sunburst shapes as well. There's a little bit back here, and I'm going to refer to the turtle a little bit that I'm looking at and add it in. Pick up a little bit more whenever I need it, dabbing it on my towel. And then these are all darker. I'm going to kind of use a line motion to create these sunbursts, just like with our step-by-step. And then these little lines in here. A very different color direction, pattern direction there, just lined direction there. And then this area is a little bit dark, so I'm going to just add that in up to about here. A little bit of this turtle yellow green. Make sure it's not too concentrated, and check it out. And add it. It is a little bit too concentrated still. So I add a little bit more water to it. And check it out one more time. That looks better. I'm going to take that, make sure this is dry. It should dry pretty fast. And I'm just going to add it to the flippers a little bit to add a highlight, like we did in the step-by-step. And a little bit on the skin. And then in the shells a little bit too. So just kind of look at the turtle and think, hey, where is this kind of bright yellowish color here? And I'll just add that in just a little bit throughout. Clean off my brush. I'm going to take the turtle mahogany and test it out on my paper. Looks good. I'm going to use this darker, drier color, and I'm just going to go ahead and do like we did before, adding it to the sunbursts, and I'm going to refer to my actual turtle for this, make sure it's dry before I add any paint to it. And I'm going to also add it to these scales on the flippers and on the head as well. I'm not going to be super exact. As you can see, I'm just kind of getting them in, and once they're in, that's where they're going. That's where they're going to be. This is a sketch, just a representation of the animal. There are a few little scales on the neck area, so I'm just going to dab some dots in there as well. Getting a little bit lined, but that's okay. Just going to add some throughout. And clean off my brush. I'm going to need a more concentrated raw umber, so I'm going to get a little bit more. I'm going to add that to my palette and add a couple drops. Add a tiny bit of water to it in my palette, not too much. Dab it off on my towel and test it out. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to use that on the shell first, because I just finished adding to the scales, but everything's pretty dry, as long as it's dry. But I'm going to start with the shell anyway, and I'm just going to add it in, and I'm going to try to add it in the same way, in the same similar pattern as the reference turtle in my video here. I'm not going to cover up the entire space of each scale. I'm just adding a little bit here and there. As you can see in the reference, some of that color shines through, and some areas are a little bit darker, some are a little bit lighter. And if you can mimic that by just adding it to parts of the spots, you can give it a little bit more dimension and depth, even though it's just a simple sketch. I'm going to fill in the eye a little bit too, right now with this dark color. I find it helpful to have an eye placement. It doesn't really look like an eye at the moment, but it will. And then I don't have any kind of reflection on it, so that's okay. Clean off my brush. Add a little, almost forgot to add a little bit of this dark color to this flipper that's in the back. And it looks real messy now, kind of an ugly stage. And I'm just gonna add some of this real concentrated yellow to add a little bit more of a highlight again, and making sure that the areas are dry first. So next I'm going to add a little bit of the turtle mahogany again, and I'm just going to add this one more layer to add a little bit more contrast. As you can see, it looks a little bit different this time around. And I'm just referring again to my turtle reference that's in the video for placement. not worrying about being too exact, just getting it a little bit in there. And then lastly, again, this is dry. I'm going to take some of this turtle brown again, just kind of a wet light. So not super concentrated like before, just a little bit. And I'm just going to add it in a little bit of a shadow. And I can see where those shadows are. Just looking at the video to figure out where those shadows are. If the turtle was gone, I could make it up, but since I have it in front of me, it works out well. So I'm going to start just adding in the ink lines with the 005 black micron, the smallest tip micron, just to get all of these lines in again or redefined. So if there's some places where the paint landed that I want to change a little bit, I can. So, and this is where, you know, I have a lot of these sketchy lines. I can kind of just say, okay, where is that actual line gonna be? I think it's just gonna be right along the top here, right outside the color. And how exactly is that going to look? So just go ahead and go throughout and redefine and redraw those initial sketch lines. And I wouldn't recommend drawing in the spots, as those don't really, the scales that are on the flippers, because those don't really stand out as much as the hardness of the shell, and it takes a while to redraw all of those. But this is your sketch, so you can make that choice as whether you want to see those spots a little bit more pronounced in the image or not. But I'm not going to redraw those. I'm going to skip right to the 08 micron just to add some real solid lines in here. And this is anywhere you see like some areas that need some extra defining, or definitely have some real hard edges. Can really clean up the image, so kind of like these dark shaded areas, like where the shadow's hitting underneath the turtle's head, and right here the turtle flipper. Underneath the turtle, there's just a lot of areas that kind of ready to get to adding some of those. I'm going to preserve this little light edge that was created here. And some of these shell lines can be a little bit more pronounced, and some of them you don't see as well, so I'm not going to add those in as much. And that'll add a little bit more of a definition to it as well, let it pop a little bit more there. And be careful not to put your hand in this one because it will smudge while it's still wet. And then I'm going to redefine that top of the neck. It was a little more curved, and I'm just noticing that now. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in this line here and thicken it up, and that will mimic that curved shape there. I'm going to add in the 08 micron to the common name to thicken it up. And then I might use the 01 micron and just kind of use it in the more delicate area. So maybe like this back flipper a little bit. Maybe darken in some of these face scales and spots a little, as they get kind of messy. I was really quick with them, but a little more exact with the face. And I didn't draw them in with the other one, the other pen, the 005. And so I think that needs a little more defining. So I'm going to define those. I didn't define them real well before, and that looks a little bit better. And maybe even some of these right here, I'm going to go ahead and define some of them. Just the ones that really pop, like the outside leading edge here and this edge here. And that's going to give it even more definition, let it pop from this page a bit more. All that line variety. And then lastly, I'm just going to add in a little outline on the scientific name, just to define that some more as well. And I like where this is at, but you can add more paint and more ink. Just let it dry in between and don't get too carried away and spend too much time on it. This is just a sketch, and it's going to be imperfectly perfect. So I think this is a good sketch for me. I'm going to leave it where it's at, and I recommend that you go ahead and write some observations on the outside. Like you could say the head was too big or too small, or maybe this is a weird kind of flipper here, wasn't it quite exact, or how much time you had, or how you felt while you were sketching the animal. You talk about the anatomy, the weather, whatever you're thinking about when you're doing this sketch. Go ahead and add a little bit into these white spaces. This is your sketch, make it your own. Great job observing your world, and keep practicing.